So Martinez. So people will start that. I'm gonna suggest that they leave the chairs as today. Here, the user, everyone agrees to monitor. Not the motion, I think. Let's see. Yeah. I think by majority vote of the board approved. So all in favor of David, Vicky, our meeting today, aye. You say it.
Okay, so you want to do introductions first?
Yeah, I guess they're going to get familiar with our.
Well, hello, Mark. Yes, I'm Sherry Wells. We're almost neighbors, so he knows me.
We've already met. I'm Wayne Welch from Weaverville area.
I'm Susie Rankin from Fairview.
Chase Howard from Riceville, welcome.
And I'm David Lee, I live in West Ashland.
And Mark, I think you have been when you grew up out in the east part of Oklahoma.
Oh, did you? Okay, we're on Dillingham.
Oh, yeah.
Next to the. Oh, did you? Okay. I ran the college for about 15 years, the farm at college.
It felt like that.
They could probably use it.
Down here part. Valley.
Okay,
Well, thank you for joining us, Mark.
we're going to call the meeting to order. This is the Buncombe County Agricultural Advisory Board, meeting for August 15, 2023. We have April 15th meetings were provided via email, correct?
August.
Yeah, August 5th. Well, no, I'm sorry, let me back up. July. The first order of business is approval of today's agenda. Do I hear a second? Do I have a motion to approve that agenda?
So moved.
Second. Second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And the ayes have it. Okay, so now we have approval of the July 18th minutes. And those were provided via email with our meeting notes. You have a chance to review those. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion of that? Okay, all in favor of the approval of the July 18th minutes, say aye. Aye. And opposed, no. Okay, and the ayes have it. Okay, do we have any board member reports? Anybody have anything to bring to us?
I can't think of anything since last time.
Okay.
So welcoming our new member. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so now we'll proceed to the Ag Advisory Board bylaws. We've got some email correspondence about this. We'll let Omni take it from here.
Yeah, so this board was adopted through state ordinance by the Board of Commissioners in 1989. And we don't have a set of bylaws. We haven't really needed them up until now. But with the bond funds coming through and, discussing projects and potential easement purchase estimates, before we take those to the Board of Commissioners, if we can't really share those, or it wouldn't be wise to share those with the public before the Board of Commissioners approved them. And so for us to be able to discuss those values, we have to go into closed session. And to do that, we need a set of bylaws. And so our county attorney, Michael Frew, drafted a set of pretty standard bylaws. If you had a chance to review them. And so we would just have to vote to adopt those bylaws, and then we'd be able to get into closed session at the end open meeting and discuss some of those values.
The one thing I just noticed on the terms, it says terms of 3 years, but I don't see it saying how many, usually you can be nominated to fill like 2 terms, right? And I don't see that clarified unless I'm missing it. Okay.
Yeah, I guess, is there generally, is it like a 2-year limit or does sport have a limit?
Well, it says in terms of 3 years, right? So that's, so you can be nominated, that's your first term, but we allow more than 1 term. And we do that pretty much on all of our boards, but that needs to be clarified.
Limited to consecutive, is that?
I think that's what it is. We have that written down in what I thought were our bylaws.
Okay.
But we do have that stipulated, and that just needs to be included in here. Or whatever was appropriate. I can't remember if it's 2 consecutive. I think that's right.
Yeah, I got that on the original packet, what you're talking about.
Okay.
I was trying to find it for the wording.
Yeah, it might be ordinance, I can check.
Maybe that's what it is.
I think that's gotta be what it is.
Okay, I can add. I can ask through it, and he sent a draft before this one as well, and I'll check to see if this is that draft. Okay.
And if there's no other changes, I mean, we can always make a motion to accept it, noting that change. Add it, so we know what you're going to do, if you're a little bit of chance to look over it. While folks are looking at it, this is useful to be reminded of at least one legal from each of these regions. So we have the Northwest covered, we have Northeast covered. We have Southeast covered and Southwest, I guess, maybe. Right?
Technically.
Technically. Okay, I was just wanting to make sure, so we do have each of our regions covered. Do we currently have 9 members?
We do,
Okay.
yes, with Mark here and now.
Okay.
Do you want to see the wording on the tender?
Interesting. The way, and this must be, it's all read it for everybody. It says tenure, the members are to serve for terms of 3 years, except the initial advisory board, right, is to consist of 3 appointees for a term of 1 year, 3 for 2 years, and 3 for 3 years. That won't matter, I think, with this, because we've already gone through that process. Thereafter, all appointments are to be for terms of 3 years with reappointments permitted. Okay, so it's not as restrictive as I thought, it just says with reappointments permitted.
Because I guess Ed has been on for trouble, he's been.
Yeah, I think his plan was once his is up this time, it took a while. I knew we had said something about reappointments, but I thought we had been more specific than that. But we could just add that language. Thank you.
See, I actually read all that stuff.
And having it all here too.
Yeah.
I'm willing to make a motion if everybody's had a chance to look over it. It's comfortable. Yeah, okay. I will make a motion that we approve the bylaws as presented with the one addition under the term of noting with reappointments permitted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, and those in favor of adoption of these bylaws, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, the ayes have it. Bylaws carried.
And if we need to make further changes as we go along, I guess we can do that.
And we go with it, yeah, and there was somewhere in here to look at the process.
Well, it might be, it might be wise to, sit down at some point in time and kind of go through the ordinance, just refresh our memory, go through the ordinance as opposed to the bylaws, just make sure we don't have any other discrepancies or opposition.
I think that's prudent in the new phase for moving into, it's good.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay, so, that,
So we have two bad applications. This one is from Astrid Kaufman, it's about 23 acres in Weaverville. And they are eligible, they applied a while ago and just need to register at FSA, and get the paperwork sorted out. And then Alice Cummings, the Cummings family have 3 properties and combined, it's about 800 acres, and they're all eligible for that. So that would bring our guide total acreage in the program, that we had combined to 24,855 acres.
is that Alice Plymouth, is that right there on the Mile Straight?
Not sure.
Okay,
Yeah. Which I think it's a family, I don't want to say it's Alice and Jerry, and then there's another name in the application that I can't
What is the minimum? I don't remember for that minimum acreage.
I think as far as I remember, there's no minimum but it has to be. And if it's a small parcel, it has to be contiguous or within a half mile of 50 acres or more of property in that. So like even smaller farms are able to be in the back program as long as they're within a half mile, 50 acres that are in that.
okay, we have the farms listed, do we have a motion to accept those?
I move we approve.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second? Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Carries. Okay, farmland preservation report.
All right, so, as we discussed more, we have to have on the board. We talked with, I think during the June meeting, we brought forward a couple of presentations for both bond projects and grant projects. Now that we've gone through the bond project site visits, we've scheduled out site visits for the grant projects this week, so I think Terry Campbell will be joining me tomorrow to see the Slocum and Morgan properties. And Susie will be joining me in Fairview on Thursday night for the site visit.
And Mark, if you're interested, did you get this now about that?
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And yeah, so the bond projects, before we take them to the Board of Commissioners, our open space bond manager has a process that we have to kind of go through, especially finance, to track the project. And so we're working on that this week. And once we discuss the values or estimates for this board, meeting with her tomorrow, and then we'll be taking up supporting commissioners after this week. And then for our last cycle of grant applications, we're still waiting to hear back on whether or not it was went through. An email to the grant representative last week, and she said they're still waiting to hear back about funding. And so we're not sure if those things yet, but hopefully in the next month we'll be able to get back to us. And then our easement project updates. So
Who's the open space bond manager? Is that a title that was bestowed on somebody currently with the county? or is that a new person?
It was a new person, so her name's Jill Carter, and when both the open space bond and affordable housing bond went through, they hired new positions. So basically track projects and manage the projects and funding with each of those bonds.
She's the lady that was at the Weaver Bill breakfast.
She was, correct.
I'm in my head, I thought I met her.
Yes.
That's right, and you were there, David, weren't you?
I was.
Okay.
And is she doing both? Or is
She-
that already hired 2 people?
Yes, they hired 2 people.
Affordable housing, they just hired someone. Jill is over all the open space, which would be like the greenways, the passive recreation and this, the conservation.
So the Larson easements, we've started on the baseline documentation report and the environmental assessment. Same with the Wesley easement, just recently completed the forest management plan. And the environmental site assessment and baseline are in progress. And similar to last month, Garrett Cove, we reached out to Just Lives for the southern half. And they want to prioritize getting the boundary dispute resolved with the community farm before moving on to Garrett Cove as well. So both of the projects for Southern Half are in hold for now. Hopefully Garrett Cove, we can start the survey at least maybe in September or October. The Schluter easement, we received some edits from NCDA for the baseline documentation report. But we also heard that they recently introduced an additional funding opportunity for easements that aren't funded at 50%. So with this property, Schluter had enough soils to go for both federal and state grant funds. So we applied for both, and NCDA funded it at 25%, but the federal grant funds didn't go through. So we reapplied second time around and it didn't go through the second time around either. So funding or compensation for that project was essentially at 25%. But when we talked to NCDA, they said last year they are introducing an opportunity where we can submit, in addition to our 4 grant applications, we can submit 4 additional funding requests for projects that either the appraisal comes back higher and their or if they meet 2 requirements, which is their appraisal amount comes back higher and they don't get any NRCS funding, we can ask to increase the funding. And so we would increase it from 25 to 50%. So it would follow the regular grant cycle. So we put in an application this fall and then we'd hear back next spring or summer. But it would increase funding from 25 to 50%, which is a significant amount. And so we talked to the Schluters and they're willing to, put in an application. And there's no guarantee that this would be funded, but it's still worth a shot given that it's an opportunity to increase their funding amount. And it wouldn't put us behind in any other way,
So let me ask a couple of questions about that. Okay, so we've tried twice for the federal funding.
yes.
Okay, so we're not gonna try for that anymore in this project.
Yeah.
Okay. And do we have, so just so we can learn going forward, it sounds like that was just not a very competitive project.
Yeah, it met the soil, I think NRCS is 50% or more prime soils, and it met the requirement, but I guess it just wasn't as competitive. Given some of the projects that they might have had on the East Coast or just in the area, and so, yeah, NCDA funded it with
Okay, and so do we have, with what we're gonna propose, because it's such a shame when we're missing out on that federal funding a couple of years.
Yeah.
But what are the projects that we're proposing or that we're gonna propose for that funding this coming cycle?
this cycle. So it'd most likely be Okoboji out of the 3, because that one is the only one. Yeah, I think it's the only one that meets that 50% prime soils requirement. I believe that one's at 91% prime soils, and Slocum and Morgan don't meet the 51%, and so our only option is state grant.
Okay. And so with the NRCS, we can only apply for one a year.
No, I think you can apply for multiple with them, but it's competitive, and yeah, it's just a sole requirement, given our topography kind of hard to meet, especially when you're on large tracks.
Okay. And then the other question I had was Flutter. So we'll apply again, but in essence, it sounds like that is kind of a different pot of NCDA money versus our typical
Yes.
funding that we're going after.
Right, so it wouldn't, it wouldn't affect our 4 regular grant application slots. These are just for in addition to those.
Okay. That would allow potentially for that to get increased.
Yeah.
And is it partly just because they realize now that it's not going to get the NRCS that they're looking to take a look at that?
Yeah, well, it sounds, so from my understanding in the past with NCDA, they wouldn't increase any of their funding. Like if you wanted, for NRCS, I think you can sometimes go back and ask for additional funds if they have it in their budget. But with NCDA, it was whatever you got was what you got. But it sounds like now they are giving you the chance to ask for additional funding if it meets those 2 requirements.
Okay.
And so in this case, it does, and so it sounds like it's a new opportunity in the past that she said they started it either last year or 2 years ago.
Just David, you probably remember because you've been here so long. I was trying to remember. So when we've done some projects where we were able to get both NRCS and NCDA, how much were we able to get? Like from NRCS, the max we got, and from NCDA.
So usually the most you can compensate a landowner is 75%.
Okay.
And so we would usually do like 50% state grant and then 25% NRCS. Or vice versa, depending on how competitive it would have been. But what we usually do now is we apply for 50% to both if it's eligible for both.
Okay.
And then if both get funded, we would just reduce our ask for one of them to keep it at 75.
Okay, so 75% was the top end.
Yeah, that's the max we can compensate.
Okay.
Have we done it?
That's what I remember. I feel like there was a 60% that I remember.
Yeah. We've gotten funding from both agencies, like Ramsey has funding from both, but I don't know that it's 75%. Yeah.
That'd be good to know.
Yeah.
That people get 75 on cost share, don't they? Is that still a thing?
So,
That's nice.
90.
yeah, if you have an easement, it's at 90%, otherwise it's, or if you have an easement or an eval, it's 90%,
Oh.
otherwise it's 70%.
Thanks for clarifying. Okay.
Yeah.
And on Sluter, we've not quote spent any money on that. Say if it all falls through and they decide they don't want 25, we haven't spent any money, that would be covered by the letter of intent, and they would be obligated for it anyway, I would guess.
Yeah, they're actually, they would be okay with it being at 25% if it doesn't go through. But because there's this opportunity,
We're just gonna wait and see.
right.
Got it.
But they said they're okay being compensated at 25% if it doesn't go.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you think I was gonna say, do you think the eastern projects were more successful just based on acreage? Is that predominantly the?
Yeah, so from what we've heard with NRCS and what Ariel's experience has been over the years, because they're generally really big farms and they have a lot of better soil. Yeah. So they're more likely to get funded.
Be interested, to look back at ours that have. Is there a certain amount of acreage really that makes it viable? The prime soils clearly, but also are they looking at that acreage?
It sounds like from what you said, like Will Hamilton in the past, he could, when, he would apply for smaller parcels, but still with really good soils. they would fund it. And then in the recent past, it sounds like they've kind of been pickier with the acreage.
Well, it's a large fixed cost. Regardless of whether it's 10 or 10,000 acres. And so, we talked about that in our operation here as well, in that bigger tractor, you're gonna get more bang for your buck. Like everything else, go big or go home.
How much that sandy soil, prime soil?
You know what?
I'm just wondering how much those sandy soils are prime soils.
Right.
Just curious. I'm not looking at it.
Well, and down east, a Tipton would be a prime. Whereas up here, it's, something else.
Right.
But still, up here is still a better soil. As opposed to down there, but still, that's still the best quality soil they've got.
Yes.
I don't know. But there again, some of those mud type soils up in the northeast part of the state. Yeah, I mean, those are, those will hold their own with most any farms, yields go. Yeah, North Sandy Lovelace covered. Anyway. Okay.
So and then the Ramsey easement, we had the NRCS representatives visit last month. We finished up the phase 2 of the environmental site assessments. They did a site visit just to make sure they were able to set eyes on it, and so we updated our baseline and included everything from that site visit and photos from all the remediation. So we're just waiting to hear back from them.
Is that the only federal one we have right now in the works?
Right now, yes,
Okay.
it is.
You're gonna be better.
Well, actually, Splendor Valley as well.
Splendor.
Yes.
So there's no federal on the coals on Newfound?
No, that one is all state,
Okay.
yeah, and similarly because of the soils. Okay, and then for the Jasper Wood Farms, the coal property, we're starting deed work. The environmental assessments and appraisals are completed and reviewed. They send some minor edits and provisions, so we're getting those done, and then we'll submit those for review again. And then Splendor Valley, I just talked to Kate Berger and Browns, and it sounds like the Browns submitted their documentation, but they're waiting on their accountant to submit the rest of the paperwork. And it's not until that's submitted that Kate Berger can start the full subordination process. And it sounds like that won't happen until she gets all the documentation, it'll be another month. So we're cutting it pretty close. I'm trying to contact NRCS, I'm just trying to make sure.
So there's a deadline.
Yes, there is a deadline.
Dustin, does he understand?
Yes, I've talked to both Dustin and Amanda, and we relayed that there's a deadline, and they said, I talked to Dustin last week, and he said they sent over documents. And he would talk to Kate and his accountant. And then I talked to Amanda today, and she said that they're waiting on their accountant to send over documents. Because this is between kind of the lender and the borrower, other than calling each party to see where we are, we can't do a whole lot more. But my plan is to call again on Thursday, just to make sure.
When basically they're waiting on the accountant to get everything to the lender.
Yes.
And then when is our deadline?
Our deadline is sometime in October. Okay. So I'm gonna, in communication with NRCS just to try and get everything sorted out. And then the Clark easement again is postponed until next month. Worthing and Krekel, we had an initial survey visit, and KJ from Key Mapping will start that process. And then Soden, we have an initial survey visit scheduled for next week. And we'll start the survey on that one as well.
And then there was a potential conservation or donation that you were gonna ask us about.
Yes, so Elizabeth Strub of Hobby Knob Farm is interested in placing a donation easement on her property. She submitted an application, I think right as Ariel was heading out on maternity leave. And so basically I was gonna ask the board. Generally, what we do is we present the project and then we schedule site visits, and then the next month. We vote on the project and the landowner visits the board meeting. But what we can't, because we'll be taking the grant projects for transaction, we'll be voting on them during September meeting. I thought we could also have this project brought to the board to be voted on in September. And I would take the grant projects and this donation easement transaction costs together to the Board of Commissioners to be voted on. So generally, usually this would be the meeting that we present the donation easement, but I don't have that presentation right now. So if the board is okay with it, I could schedule a site visit and give some general information about the property. And then during our next board meeting in September, you would just vote on it. It's a working farm, it's about 40 acres, it's next to Claxton farm, and I can send out general information, but the board's okay visiting the property without an initial presentation, and then voting in September. I thought I would present that idea to the board and see what you think.
Okay, so we are gonna do you will go ahead and schedule the visit, we'll do the visit prior to the meeting, so those.
Yeah.
Folks that visited can report to the meeting as well.
Yes, and I can send out like some brief information by email before the site visit too.
It's unlikely we wouldn't do it that would be.
Yeah, we always do the site visit before we vote.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I'm okay with that as long as we have the site visit and we have that information, because then that's the important part to me, that board members actually lay eyes on it and get to see it and talk to the landowner.
When are you doing the site visit on that one?
So that one, I would talk to the landowner to try and schedule something, but it can be either next week, or basically before September. Our next board meeting would be September 19th, so basically before September 19th. Anytime before then, I would talk to the landowner, see when she has availability, and then when the board has availability, give you a couple of dates, depending on who can make it.
So we're expediting because it's a donation.
Yeah, it would be easier to try and take the donation. So generally, when we ask the Board of Commissioners for transaction costs, it would be easier to ask for the grant transaction costs and the donation.
That's what we typically do.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like the board is okay with that, so I'll send out some general information and try to schedule the site visit.
Tell me the name of that one again.
Elizabeth Strub is her name, and it's Hobby Knob Farm.
She has sheep and goats.
Spell-
40 acres.
Spell it like
Honest too.
Oh, yeah, she was mamas too. I can tell you're a fan of
I know them very well. I didn't know they were doing this, so that was kind of.
Was she a nutritionist?
Do what?
Was she a nutritionist?
No, her husband makes teeth or
Oh, okay, yeah.
plates or crowns, or he's some kind of dental lab guy. But I didn't know they had that. That used to be Dr. Schuete's land where the Strubs are at. Dr. Schuete had that farm there. But I didn't know there were 40 acres. And I have bush hog good. I know a lot of it, but I didn't know there were 40 acres in there.
I can double check, I think it's about 40, but I'll double check.
Yeah, that's just off the top of my head is what I was thinking. But yeah, if you send us out an email, everybody with kind of your typical information that you provide, that'll be good, and then hopefully 2 or 3 folks will be able to go for the site visit.
That land has a rental house on it. It also has a Airbnb on it. And then it's got a regular farm situation, so.
So the owners, so there's not an quote owner dwelling is not on there, are they? That's one of those that they converted.
It is, there, she lives on the property as well.
There's
She
three
got-
houses.
Yeah, they live in did you say Elizabeth's Road?
Yeah.
They live in the shoot, in what used to be Dr. Shute's house, but I know her sister built a house somewhere on the property because they have a ladies' night once every 2 months, and my wife goes. That's the only reason I know what's going on there.
So there's already 3 or 4,
There's three
dwelling.
There's 3 dwellings, yes, so there'd be no more allowed.
My only interest was when you said it connected to us. I don't know where it connects to us and that, because there's several, well, there's a couple
But
of
it's-
houses land in between us and them.
Okay,
Unless they go up on the mountain, they could connect to us at the top of the mountain.
gotcha. So it's not adjacent, but it's in.
Right, but they still would connect to our farm on top of the mountain. Because we let Darren stroll her husband every once in a while, we let him hike our area at the top up there, so.
So it's in close proximity, whether it's.
Yeah, you could throw a rock on it.
Okay, okay. So it'll be worth getting eyes on it.
That's good. So, I think that was all I had for the report.
Do we have any lady pictures? Did you pick up?
It was appropriate. She had it during our meeting.
Yes, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Oh, during our meeting.
Yeah, it was actually cool.
that morning, right before the meeting or like during the meeting, but yes.
Yeah, I think the burn though was like at 11 something.
But yes, I'll send out some, she sent out some pictures, and I guess I didn't send all the pictures, just the announcements.
You said maybe one photo. I don't have the visual of her pulling the baby, maybe one.
And then I saw her little boy
All of
with,
her,
yeah,
yeah.
she makes beautiful babies.
Yeah. That was too fun,
Everybody doing great.
yes, yeah, they're all doing well. She said the birth went well, they were able to go home the next day and relax. So.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Oh, good.
Awesome.
I almost added a photo to the agenda, but I was like, maybe. It's- Yeah.
I motion to add the picture.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So I guess the last part of this would just be, if it sounds like the board was interested, or some of the members were interested in hearing some of the easement purchase estimates that we got back for, I think, Nesbit and Gillespie. And so if we wanted to discuss that, we would just have to make a motion to go into closed session. And from what
Did not with any language.
yeah, so
Okay.
he said essentially you would just, someone would make a motion to go into closed session. And then cite the statute and which reason. And so these were some of the reasons. And number 2 is to prevent the premature disclosure of an honorary degree, scholarship, prize, or similar award. This is technically, I guess, considered a grant.
Is that the one he said you cite?
Either this one, or I think number 5 might also. I think that's more up to the board's discretion. Number 5 from that.
So what?
So you would say, so someone would make a motion to go in closed session. And cite the general statute, which is the one section and 5.
So, well, before we do that, were there any other? Because once we go into closed session, we won't come back And to open, we'll close it out. So was there any other discussion, questions, announcements, or anything while we're in open session that needed to be discussed? And there's no votes or anything that we're gonna need to do.
No, because the board has already voted to approve the project. And so this is a discussion, but if there's anything based on the estimates that you wanted to discuss anything further or change, then maybe.
Okay, so there's a potential we would have to come back into open session, so y'all are just having to stick around, I guess.
Okay, it should take 2 months, I'm sorry.
If there wasn't anything else, I'll make a motion to go into closed session for North Carolina statute 143-318, 11, section 5. And do I need to read section 5?
No.
Okay.
Second,
Yeah.
Yeah. Susie second, we have a motion and a second, do we have any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no, and motion passes.
Awesome, so let's make sure, have they turned everything off?